Hello, welcome everyone that's just jumped on. We're gonna wait a few more minutes, but welcome. Glad to see you here. Hello to those of you who've just joined. Thank you and welcome. We are just gonna wait a few more minutes as people continue to come online. Hello, Kim. Good to see you.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
Good, great. Diane, who else got?
Hello.
Beth? How you
Hello. Gosh, it's been a while.
doing? It has been a while.
How
Good
are
to
you
see
doing?
you.
Great to see
I'm
you
doing
too.
Yeah,
You're doing well?
I am.
Excellent. Glad to hear it.
Good, good.
Me too.
Well, I'm excited about this event tonight.
So am I. And look, people are attending on a Friday, a beautiful Friday night. It's so beautiful outside.
Yeah,
It's beautiful inside too.
that's right. Yeah.
The great indoors has a
Mhm.
lot to be said for it.
That's right.
I thought about going out on the deck if there wasn't construction going on right outside.
Oh,
That would have been
it's
a fun option.
Yeah.
indeed.
How many people do you know is going to be here, Chris? You know?
No, I didn't get an accurate head count. I am waiting a little bit for Frank to come on though. I don't
Okay.
want to start without Frank. Frank's been talking and spearheading since the last time Diane came to Mountain Home. Frank was talking about when can we have her back. So
Good.
when Frank gets on, we can start.
That's
Okay.
fine. We will wait as long as it takes for Frank. In the meantime, maybe somebody, do we have a comedian in the audience or a warm-up band or something?
No, we'll wait about 3 or 4 more minutes if that's all right. Diane. Just to
Sure.
make
Of course.
sure. I know that sometimes I have trouble logging on with my old laptop and then I'm like, no, wait for me. So
Oh, that's why I logged in. That's why I logged on early, because you just never know with technology.
Mhm.
It's very moody and sometimes unpredictable. So sure. And if he comes late, that's totally fine. No problem.
I guess I should, next time I will have like little talking points for while we're waiting, you know, jokes and, no, I'm not good at that. So something else.
I yeah, we're good. This just gives us a little bit of time to decompress
Mhm.
and kind of integrate.
My mom just texted me on chat to, I should get myself some whiskey, then I'll think I'm funny.
We can wait for that if you want to grab some whiskey.
I think you're funny when I'm drinking too, Chris.
Oh, dear.
I'll keep you two in mind as a duet for the spring.
Yeah,
Oh,
there you go.
Yeah.
That's funny. Oh, it feels good to laugh. Crazy times.
Mhm.
Mom, do you have anybody in the waiting room? No, okay. I am gonna get started because if people miss my spiel, they're not gonna care about that anyway. So I'm just gonna be the rules and introduction guy. So I'm Chris DeVore with the Mountain Home Arts Council. And right to my side is my beautiful wife, Hannah. So we are so excited to have Diane here today. I can't tell you how much. We've been planning this for a little while, let's just say. I'm gonna share my screen real quick and I'm gonna do a quick introduction. And I promise I won't take too much of your time. Want to get straight to Diane speaking. It's funny to speak and try to use your computer at the same time. That never works, does it? So first off, if you could just have good, of course, Zoom etiquette and be muted when you're not speaking, especially with as many of us as are on it right now. I think that's about it. We'll break in. We will have a time for question and answer afterwards. But Diane said if you really have a big question, you can do that little raise your hand from the bottom and interrupt her if you have a big question that's very timely. So first off, I just want to say that, you know, none of this comes together without a lot of people. And so there's a lot of people to thank, you know, the City of Mountain Home, the Mountain Home Public Library. I mentioned Frank Monasterio. He's been a champion of this event. I think he started discussing with Diane during the question and answer, could we do this? Could we have a talk on this? And he's been excited about it ever since and has been a champion of it, helped fund it, all that. So Frank, big thank you to Frank. Idaho Commission on the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Wittenberger Foundation, the Hampton Inn Johnson Brothers Hospitality, the Air Force Base Officer Spouses Club. I told you there's a few. First Interstate Bank and Foundation, Idaho Power, Mountain Home News, Hawaii Highlights, and of course the Arts Council Board patrons and volunteers. A big thank you to all of them. Upcoming events. Well, guess what? We've got an event tomorrow. And it's very exciting. It's a workshop, a writer's workshop that Diane will be putting on. And there's this link to that, and it will be 10 a.m. tomorrow. So I'm so excited about that. Hope to see you all there and bring your friends. We have got the launch of our 13th volume of the Whistle Pig. It's Fall Coffee House will be at the library, as you can see, on October 15th at 7 p.m. We're not sure how we're going to do that yet. Might be a kind of open house style maybe a little different, maybe outside. We'll let you know the details, but now you've got the date. Same thing with Art at the Inn. Our Visual Arts Guild is going to be putting on the 15th annual Art at the Inn. Again, we will be making some moderations and keeping this safe for our community. But that will be from 12 to 7 on November 6th. Very popular event, and we missed it last year, so we're hoping to pull that off this year. Another thing that's coming up, as I hit the button way too many times, but I will get right to it. My finger just hovered above, and okay, we're going to be, along with the Mountain Home Public Library, we're going to be hosting and partnering with them to Let's Talk About It, sponsored by the Idaho Commission for Libraries, and it brings together humanities scholars and adult readers. And our theme this year is Living in the Modern Rural West. And as you can see, we're going to be covering 3 books, and we'll have 3 different scholars come and speak. It's just a great program, and these great selections this year. November 27th, Uprooted, Recovering the Legacy of the Places We've Left Behind. December 18th, The Solace of Open Spaces. And January 15th, Indian Creek Chronicles. So very excited for that coming up. And then we get to what we all came here for. So excited, like I said, to have Diane Raptosh here tonight. We've been planning this for a couple of years, and I'm so to see it come to fruition. And in a time when we really, really need it and need these events and need this time together. Diane Raptosh, a graduate of the University of Michigan MFA program. Her 4th book of poetry, American Amnesiac, was longlisted for the 2013 National Book Award. She was a recipient of 3 fellowships in literature from the Idaho Commission on the Arts. She served as the Boise Poet Laureate, as well as the Idaho Writer in Residence. 2018, she won the Idaho Governor's Arts Award in Excellence. And also, as we're going to find out tonight, she's a highly active ambassador for poetry. She has been given the poetry workshop. She has been giving poetry workshops everywhere from riverbanks to maximum security prisons. She teaches literature and creative writing and co-directs the program in criminal justice prison studies at the College of Idaho. So please join me in welcoming Diane Raptosh.
All right, I believe I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Thank you, Chris, for that generous introduction. Thank you so much to the Mountain Home Arts Council for arranging this event. And Chris in particular, as he said, we've been trying to plan this for at least 2 years. And then COVID hit. And then there was that brief, 3 minutes or so over the summer that we all felt that maybe COVID was waning, and COVID, being the trickster that it is, decided to really come back with a vengeance. In the meantime, Chris had been hard at work finding a motel room for me to stay in. And so he's been putting in many, many, many hours to make this happen. And I'm so grateful for that. So much behind the scenes work goes in to make an event like this possible. And I'm just incredibly grateful, Chris, to you and for everybody, all the behind the scenes working, all the supporters and so on. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. It is a Friday night. It's beautiful, outdoors and indoors. So it's an honor to be here with you tonight virtually. And as Chris mentioned, please feel free to either raise your hand if you have a question or a comment or an addition or an amplification of anything I put out there. And also I will, we'll have some Q&A at the end. So we'll have some give and take. I don't want to just go on endlessly. But I have a few words to say. I want to give just a kind of overview of the criminal justice system in America. I became interested in it and started studying it passionately and rigorously about 25 years ago. Because I guess as a poet, well, a poet is somebody free, according to the American poet June Jordan. And as a poet, I'm interested in issues of freedom. I like wondering about who is free and who isn't free, and in fact, whether anyone is truly ever free at all. Also, I had a colleague, a sociologist, Robin Lawrenson, and we would share our research interests. And one of her interests was criminology. And the more I learned about the criminal justice system in America, the more I realized it was a key to understanding the history of America, and so many of the problems within America that we're seeing laid bare, thanks actually to COVID. So COVID has played this role in bringing to full shared collective vision so many of the issues facing the United States. So one helpful lens for considering all these intersections is the criminal justice system. So the last 30 plus years have seen an explosion in the use of imprisonment in a great number of countries. The rise has taken place in democratic countries, as well as in totalitarian states. It's occurred in rich countries, poor countries. It's happened in countries in the north, south, east, west, and the consequences have been profound. In some countries, the explosion in prison populations has been matched by massive expenditure on prison building and upkeep. Others have not been able to build more prisons. They just keep shoveling more and more prisons into spaces available, causing a dramatic increase in violence and disease. So in many societies, including the United States, imprisonment has become, frankly, big business. There are very powerful vested interests that see increased profit in more and larger prisons, private prison corporations, banks and bond financiers, architects and construction companies, and political representatives of depressed rural areas where prisons are now basically used as sites of economic development, are just a few of the interests that are now actively engaged in lobbying for prison expansion, divorced from crime rates and from other public safety needs. Increased public expenditure on locking people up has resulted in dramatically less expenditure on other public services such as hospitals, schools, and care of the elderly. So I want to give you just a brief example of some of the costs, some of the profits that are being made in the world of imprisonment. And I'm going to share this screen here. Well, it's probably not sharing yet. Is it sharing? Can you guys see that?
Yes, Professor.
Thank you. So this is from the Nib. The Nib is kind of a comic site that brings to our collective attention stuff that's not very funny. So here's a brief sort of comic graphic. Thomas Robinson has been in jail since '96 when he was sentenced to life without parole, without pleading guilty to murder. He maintains his sanity behind bars, talking to friends and family on the outside. But prison phone calls and text messaging have been outsourced to private companies that view inmates as a captive market, subject to regulations and price gouging. Robinson calls that, nickel and diming, legalized extortion. And this is not even, we're not even talking about privatized prisons. This just happens in regular prisons where, you know, this kind, what he calls legalized extortions. Almost everything comes at a cost when you're behind bars, including text messaging, phone calls, 98 cents a call, 25 cents a text. These absurdly high prices make communication behind prison walls hard, even though, of course, the research suggests that keeping connections with loved ones vastly reduces recidivism rates. Recidivism rates being the rate at which people return to prison. Roughly 73% of inmates do end up back in prison. The reasons are complicated. They end up back in their communities. It's hard to find jobs once you've been in prison. It's hard to find transportation. Perhaps it's hard to find affordable housing, and the cycle continues. That the former inmate ends up back in a community where the drugs were being dealt, and so on, ends up back in prison. Anyway, back to the what he calls extortion. Inmates are limited to 3 15-minute calls per day. Each call costs about $1, but prisoners can work, if they're considered to be lucky, they can work for actually pennies an hour. This means they can only make calls during specific hours. Some have to skip work for urgent calls to their lawyer, which costs them even more money, and it's money they can't afford to lose. So prison telecom companies monetize precious communication with families. If you have cash, you can buy more privileges, like a tablet that sends text messages for 25 cents a pop, or a video service. So they're offering everyday technology at a significant markup, and they know they can do so because these families, most of whom come from impoverished conditions in the first place, they're just nickel and dime to death. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that. So the United States of America is now the world's leading jailer, according to the Sentence Project, with roughly 2.3 million people incarcerated. Of course, perhaps you've heard, this is a greater percentage of its residents behind bars than any other country in the world. 13.5 million annually, 3/4 of whom are nonviolent offenders with no history of violence at all, and another 5.1 million are on probation or parole. And this number varies here and there, of course, over the months. But an unprecedented 1 in 31 or 32 adults is now behind bars in America, a higher rate than any other nation, more than Russia, South of Africa, Mexico, Iran, India, Australia, Brazil, and Canada combined. This goes on syllabi that I use in my courses. The US prison industrial complex, as you'll hear it called, is now the largest in the history of the world. It is the case that Black men in the United States are imprisoned at a rate far higher than they were in South Africa under apartheid, reports a reliable source called the Sentencing Project. More Black men are behind bars or under the watch of the criminal justice system now. In other words, there are more African American men in prison and jail or on probation and parole than were enslaved in 1850, before the start of the Civil War, according to law professor and civil rights activist and prison scholar Michelle Alexander. She is one of the most foremost scholars in the field. Her book called The New Jim Crow, I recommend very strongly to everyone. So more than 846,000 Black men were incarcerated, back in 2008, according to the US Bureau of Justice. African Americans make up 13.6% of the United States population, according to census data, but Black men make up to 40.2% of all prison inmates. So the criminal justice system is the newest in a long line of societal structures that have disenfranchised people of color. So in an excerpt from the book I just mentioned by Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, she writes that despite today's belief in something that we might consider to be color blindness, our criminal justice system effectively bars African American men in particular from citizenship, treating them as a separate caste. Here's a brief quote from that book. Denying African Americans citizenship was deemed essential to the formation of the original Union. Hundreds of years later, America is still not an egalitarian democracy. The arguments and rationalizations that have been trotted out in support of racial exclusion and discrimination in its various forms have changed and evolved, but the outcome has remained largely the same. End of the quote by Michelle Alexander. I would also add that the 20th century writer, critic, and poet Adrienne Rich suggests that these high numbers of this very high rate of incarceration in the United States has the overall effect of silencing a potential intelligentsia whose stories, whose ideas, whose visions are kept from public access. All right, so I want to talk about women here for just a bit. While women remain a relatively small percentage of those imprisoned worldwide and represent around 10% of the US prison population, their rates of incarceration have also been steadily increasing, with the weight of this alarming trend falling most heavily, not surprisingly, on women of color who are also poor. Most are incarcerated for nonviolent economic crimes such as theft and forgery, and in many countries involved in the so-called war on drugs, women are convicted for nonviolent drug crimes under increasingly harsh mandatory prison sentencing laws. These make up the bulk of those women recently sent to prison. All right, so I like to bring up the fact that white collar crime wreaks far more havoc on a society than the small-time drug dealer, nonviolent drug crimes, and other such crimes, nonviolent, which send vast numbers of Americans to prison. So there are two different sets of justice. The United States has a little discussed habit of criminalizing its social problems. And its social problems are many. And they've been revealed to us, as I mentioned in the outset of our meeting today. They've been revealed to us more openly, even brazenly, during the time of COVID. The fissures within the society, the fractures, this invisible virus has laid bare for those who were perhaps unable or willing to see the vast social, racial, socioeconomic, and various public health disparities that are all too real right here in the United States. Various scholars have discussed the criminalization of poverty, and so I'd like to talk about that a little bit further. The criminalization of poverty has increased significantly in the United States since the Great Recession of 2009. Poor and low-income people, especially people of color, you're detecting a trend here, face a far greater risk of being targeted, profiled, fined, arrested, harassed, violated, and incarcerated for minor offenses far more than other Americans. A broken tail light, an unpaid parking ticket, a minor drug offense, sitting on a sidewalk, or sleeping on a park can result in jail time for members of these vulnerable populations. The criminalization of poor people happens at the intersectional oppressions of race, class, gender, and gender identity. There's a whole lecture that I could go into about that. The criminalization of children is also quite prominent, especially inhumane and disproportionately affecting, yes, you guessed it, low income, Latinx, and Black children, LGBTQIA children, and children with disabilities. What is called the school to prison pipeline, a disturbing national trend in which children are essentially funneled out of public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems, is all too real. Many of these children who enter the prison pipeline have learning disabilities, have histories of poverty, abuse, neglect, may have parents or family members in prison, and would indeed benefit more from additional educational and counseling services rather than isolation, punishment, and the act of being pushed out and away from their peers and their schools. So there are zero tolerance policies in place, policies that criminalize minor infractions of school rules, while cops in schools lead to school students being criminalized for behavior that really should be handled inside the school with trained counselors who have understanding, empathy, and correct. Not surprisingly, students of color are especially vulnerable to these policies. So this pipeline is a significant factor in removing opportunities for self-fulfillment, education, and employment, often creating and perpetuating the cycle of poverty. By conducting research and reports on the various components of these injustices and supporting movements on the ground with resources and capacity, there's an organization called the Criminalization of Poverty Project, which aims to encourage and influence policy that will move us from intersectional injustice into intersectional justice. So for about 25 years or so, I've been teaching courses. Again, I used to teach them with my friend Robin Lawrence, and I give a shout out to her because I know she has a friend in the audience, and somebody in addition to me. And I miss having her in the classroom with me, but we started bringing students to prison, and here's how. The College of Idaho, where I teach, started asking faculty members, well, where would you like to bring your students? We need some off-campus experiences. Students need to travel, get out of the classroom and get out into the field. Various faculty members were saying, oh, how about Scotland? How about Australia? How about Hawaii? And Robin and I looked at each other and almost simultaneously said, how about prison? So we started about 25 years ago, 22 to 25 years ago, together taking students into prisons. And we used to have our first try at that had students teaching a creative writing workshop in the medium security prison. Actually, they did a great job. We trained them in advance. It was our first time, so yes, we were all quite nervous, but in the end, it was a wonderful experience. But I've since changed how I teach that class because I don't have Robin to help with all the shuffling around that entails. But I do think it should be every person's civic duty to go visit a prison. I believe Barack Obama is one president, perhaps the first president to have done that ever. It's Friday night and my fact bank is a little weaker than usual. But to go into a prison gives you a very visceral experience. Even just hearing the gates clang shut behind you. In Matthew, in the Bible, Jesus tells his followers to visit inmates in prison. I just think it's a good thing to do so that we can have firsthand access to our fellow community members and to see what life is like on the inside. So a course I'm teaching now is called Pros and Cons. It's a literature class. It's a literature of witness. It honors the diverse voices of prisoners across the United States, demystifying prison regimes, identifying central themes and metaphors that anchor prison writing. But perhaps most importantly, what I see as most important in a course like this anywhere is recognizing a humanity in prisoners in a way that state violence denies, recognizing a humanity in prisoners that is messed with and is misrepresented in a lot of the programming we see on Netflix and in movies, on news feeds, and so on. So indeed, our goal in that course, or my goal anyway, is to inspire all of us to imagine a world without prisons. And that seems like a tall order, but why not? I keep saying in all of my classes and to pretty much anybody who comes near me, I think COVID has come in as a teacher, yes, a destroyer also, but as a teacher to say, look, so many of these systems are not working. Human beings, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to reimagine, reconceive, and replace these systems with? So looking at these forms of literature, ranging from the texts that I provide in a class at the college to some writing that I will share with you from inmates that I've taught here locally, they move us in a visceral way and with such an intensity of witness that ideally they will engage us in the critical issues at hand and maybe move us to try to change ourselves in the world we're living in order to try to remedy what's not going so well, change things for the better. I have a quote from the political activist Eugene V. Debs, who died in 1921. It's a quote that I keep on my refrigerator. I don't know if you can see it. It's very old. It's been on my refrigerator for years. And I identify with this quote very much, also with many of the thoughts of Eugene V. Debs. Years ago, I recognized my kinship with living things. And I made up my mind that I was not one bit better than the meanest on earth. I said then, and I say now, that while there is a lower class, I am in it. While there is a criminal element, I am of it. While there is a soul in prison, I am not free. So again, a radical literature of witness is a literature that not only changes lives by bearing witness, but by raising our consciousness about what is going on, and then perhaps again, getting us to do something about it. A radical literature of witness says, hey, look at this. Do you see what's going on here? How are you going to react? Can you just stand by and shrug your shoulders? Okay, so I have one more site I would like to share with you through screen share on the subject of literature of witness. Hang on, hang on, hang on. So at Hamilton College in New York, there is a one-of-a-kind American prison writing archive. Here on this site, I can put the link out in the chat. Here, I'll do that so you guys can look at it. Well, I can't do two things at once, so I have to stay focused. I have to stay focused, otherwise I will get beside and beyond myself. The writer and prison scholar Doran Larson got a huge grant from the NEA to put this together. And he gives the usual spiel here, 2.2 to 2.3 million citizens in prisons. In case you think I'm making this up, these figures up, you can, you can find these statistics almost anywhere. And by the way, as I often say in my courses, I don't come from any political perspective on the criminal justice system in America. Both Republicans and Democrats have contributed to its skyrocketing populations. One is as guilty as the other of this. Anyway, there remains widespread ignorance of how many people are in prison, of the conditions inside of prisons in America, and such overall ignorance leads to a kind of indifference and apathy about how incarcerated Americans and prison workers experience these conditions, right? They're purposefully, prisoners are put way outside of our towns, on the far boundaries of our consciousness. We forget about them. We don't think about them unless, as is increasingly the case, we have and it's almost always the case now, we have a family member, friend, aunt, neighbor, step-parent who's in prison or jail or under parole, supervision, and the like. So increasingly, policymakers, students, and scholars are becoming more and more aware and active in producing knowledge and making it available so that we can understand what's going on in prisons in the United States today. So the American Prison Writing Archive invites writing by not only imprisoned populations, but prison staff, right? Correctional officers, people who work in prisons have very stressful jobs. They have to go through all those clangy bars, show their ID, empty their pockets. It's a very stressful place, even to bring students on a very temporary basis every year, a few days a week. It's traumatizing. And so this archive is seeking to gather writings by employees. I think the average age of a correctional officer, the average life expectancy of a correctional officer in the United States is like 56. It's a hard job. It's underpaid work. And I will let you know, as just a point of comparison, in Norway, for example, correctional officers have graduate degrees in psychology and counseling. So their purpose is not just to serve as like big bodyguard, scary type dudes, but rather to know how to interact with the citizens of their prisons and help them to become better people rather than to continue in the practices of punishment almost exclusively. We have a lot to learn from our Scandinavian prisons. Doran Larson, who runs this prison, this archive, has written a book called Fourth City, Essays from Prison in America. I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this? It's hard to know where to hold a book in front of the little tiny camera dot. Anyway, it's called Fourth City, Essays from the Prison in America, edited by Doran Larson. He's got all kinds of writing by inmates across the country. They want to have writing from every state in America within this archive. So you can go, anybody can go onto this archive, read what is there. You can, just go visit it, click around. They're in the process of organizing by subtopic and theme the pieces that they're collecting. College of Idaho students and others are serving as volunteers, transcribing essays. If anybody out in our presentation today feels like helping transcribe essays, here's the link there. It's a volunteer opportunity. And you read these pieces that are handwritten by inmates across the country to hear their stories of witness and thereby become enlightened by those pieces. All right, I'm unsharing that. On a similar note, right here in Idaho, which is among the most incarcerating places in the world, sadly, there are some positive changes being made, which is very good to know. But first, the bad news, first the difficult figures and statistics. Per 100,000 people, Idaho incarcerates about 700 people, whereas a country like Sweden, which has about the same crime rate as the United States, incarcerates fewer than 70. If you factor in crime rates, and Idaho's is relatively low, it means Idaho is among the top 5 most punitive places in the world. Idaho's prisons are overflowing today, and recidivism rates are extremely high. Among the 17,000 people on probation and parole, around 3,000 of them end up recidivating or returning to prison every year. So, in short, people in prison are trapped in a cycle of trauma. But the good news is there are people and institutions, organizations that are trying to help, are trying to interrupt these cycles. So over the past 6 months, well, not 6 months ago, I was invited to be on the board of the newly formed Idaho Prison Arts Collective. And its mission is to bring attentive and energetic, transformative arts experiences to as many residents of Idaho prisons as possible. What do transformative arts experiences mean? Okay, using writing, dance, music, visual art, to liberate the inner human from the prison of the past, from past traumas, other conditions. it probably goes without saying that many people who end up in prison come from deeply traumatized childhoods, poverty, drug addiction, physical abuse. Just to take one example, I always think about California. The average level of education of an inmate in a California prison is the 4th grade, right? So to have opportunities such as this come into our prisons at large is tremendously useful and transformative. Also, it helps isolated people feel that they're cared for by and not forgotten by the greater community. It releases them from potentially vicious cycles of self-harm, low self-esteem, and helps to create more wholesome cycles of self-care, strengthens the moral and reasoning centers of the brain. And so here's the deal, 95% of people in Idaho prisons will return to our communities. Many of them have children, there are neighbors, they have other family members, such that a prisoner's well-being or lack of well-being has an impact on many people around them. So if we can improve the rehabilitative experience in Idaho prisons and help people cope with difficult conditions after release, we can have a serious and multiplying impact on society. So currently, the Idaho Prison Arts Collective is doing some writing classes at ISCI Men's Prison. Right now I'm teaching, not teaching, but I'm a writing teacher, so they're able to send through the Idaho Commission on the Arts pieces of writing in response to prompts I've provided, and I comment on their pieces of writing. I send them back to Jocelyn at the Idaho Commission on the Arts, and they send those back through the proper channels. They end up back in the inmates' hands, some feedback on their writing. So they feel cared about. They feel far less abandoned and forgotten. So in addition to writing classes that are going on even as we speak during a massive pandemic, which is horrible, by the way, in the prisons, as you can imagine. There are ukulele and music lessons that will be taught at at South Boise's Women's Prison, drawing and painting classes for women at SICI, mindfulness classes. And in the future, we have visions of dance classes, theater projects with local actors and directors, art exhibits, perhaps publishing opportunities and performances, and other such activities. So that's the Idaho Prison Arts Collective. And there are collectives like this popping up across the country because there are so many amazing people who want to improve our systems, our failing structures, and make all of our community members feel welcomed and cared about in a time when so many are feeling abandoned, shunned, forgotten. So that's some of the good stuff that's happening. I'm not able to see if any hands are up or anything because I've got this other screen in front of my face, but if you can hang in there for a few more minutes, what I'm going to do now is read a couple of pieces from that the men have written in a recent in a workshop that I gave prior to COVID, otherwise known as the Before Times. Just to give you a taste of their writing subjects and voices. Okay, so this one is titled "The Space in Which I Walk." by Patrick. The space in which I walk consists of a distance of a single step and a turn. Lockdown, maximum security unit. 2 cell walks. 336 hours in 2 weeks worth of days. Out of that time, we leave this box for a total of 8 hours, 10 minutes. 35 minutes of outdoor recreation on a dirt-packed yard with patches of dried yellow grass, rocks, and a half-concrete basketball court. The ball is worn bald with use, lying stationary in the corner where fences meet, lopsided to the point that it no longer bounces straight. This, followed by 35 minutes of day room time. A scheduled block allotted every other day. This being our day off, meaning we do not get any time out today. I break the monotony by performing this step, turn, shuffle. The ritual alleviates pain and stiffness brought on by hours upon hours of idleness. I stop, staring mindless out of a 6-inch wide by 3-foot window. A television mounted on the wall adjacent to the cell door broadcasts a rerun of some silly sitcom. A resident from another walk talks on one of the Tiers 4 telephones in an almost defeated looking manner. A different fella makes his way to a microwave to warm his coffee. None of the usual social camaraderie or shooting the shit. Barely time to give an obligatory head nod of recognition. I notice on the door frame to my right, the paint worn in varying degrees, all the way down to the metal. I ponder this phenomenon I am gazing at, wondering how much contact has had to be made with the body to wear such as this. One touch or brush of the clothing at a time. No picking, chipping, or scratching. A clean and polished wear. How much time has been spent standing at the door, peering out the window, starving for sensory stimulation, adequate enough to ease some of the pain of monotony brought on by days, weeks, and months sitting in a box. A pause in activity. Arm pressed against the door frame. My personal contribution to the eroding paint. Skin touching the chill of bare steel. Sometimes I do just informal writing in a journal. Here's one from a guy named Steve, dated December 2017. I've been here a year now. I've searched and I haven't found an evil dude yet. I mean, this is the place where they put all the bad guys, right? All I see is brokenness and ego, and a lot of it. This place reminds me of high school on steroids. All of us here seem to want to be cool and accepted. What I really see is a bunch of us just struggling to love ourselves. And what a messed up place to try to find that. Nothing is more long distance than prison. I don't have many friends anymore, and the ones I do have are dropping off like flies. I get it, I really do. I mean, how do you remember someone who's been so long gone? Can you imagine a prison run by love? And what would that even look like? All right, I have one more very short one to share. I mean, I have pages and pages I could share, but we're getting up to our Q&A time. So this is a short one. It's by somebody named Jim. I am a voice. I am a voice. I'm a voice you know, one you knew, and one you don't know. When you strip away my face, my color, my tattoos, my body, my mistakes, my past, my flaws, what is left? A voice. And when all those things are stripped away from you, the same thing will remain, a voice. And at that point, all those other distinctions don't matter, because every man, every woman deserves a voice. Whether it's understood or accepted are afterthoughts. But every voice is worth being heard. And all a voice asks for is for someone to listen to it. Okay. Let's hear from your voices. That's probably plenty of mine for now. But their writing is pretty high quality, and they get real, right? They start out a little. The first workshops, they're all kind of posturing and nervous and wondering, in the men's prison anyway, am I going to be safe to let my guard down? Because prison, you can't let your guard down. I mean, even when you're sleeping, So it's hard for these men living among men to enter a space where basically the imperative is to be vulnerable and to get real. All right. Questions, comments, observations?
Well, that was phenomenally moving, Diane. So many facts, and wow, that's a lot to digest.
It is a lot to digest. And I moved through it at a fairly quick pace, but here we are. Yes.
I wish there's a lot of I was just thinking, I wish there was more feedback in this Zoom kind of, like, there was a lot of, my wife and I were giving a lot of verbal and feedback that you couldn't hear, but this isn't a huge question, but I was really curious, what are some of the prompts that prompted the writing that you read?
The one about, I read some of the more informal ones because they're the ones that are giving us the literature of witness about their day-to-day lives in prison. And I wanted to foreground those. One was just a journal writing. The space in which I walk was developed out of a journal entry. And I said, wow, you've got some really good stuff in there. It was more general before. And then I was trying, as I do with, with writing students, as you probably know, it's like, get more concrete. For people who've never been to prison, what is it like in your room? What's in the room? How big is your window? Tell me about that ball. What do you see outside? So it started as a more general journal entry, and you went back and revised it, and you heard all that tremendously specific detail, which made it feel as if we were right there in the prison with them. The microwave, in these very, very cramped spaces. So let's see, there's something in the, I love your presentation. I'm a clinician at Idaho State Correctional Center. I'm privileged to help residents work. I think we can get, I forget now who the top person is for getting more residents connected into the writing program, even virtually. Because I know they've had some reshuffling of administrators, and things are improving tremendously in our prisons out in CUNA anyway. I know that the administration is more progressive, and they want more rehabilitative and educational and artistic opportunities for the residents. Let's see, who are some people I know? Noelle Kwong Peck. She's a former student at the College of Idaho. She now works there. Ron Cook is somebody I know there, but I don't know the name of the head guy. But probably Ellen, you do. I hope that was helpful, and I'm so glad you could be here. Now there's a great opening opportunity for more volunteer. Well, okay, it's COVID, right? But the people at the top in these institutions are far are in a different place than they were like 20 years ago. It was very hard for us to get into the prisons and volunteer there, but it's much easier. And so many of the people at the top are totally on board and want more opportunities for the residents. Yes, we will have access to the recording later on, and I will keep you posted if you're a student about that a little bit later. Good. Other questions or comments? You have a link or email for transcribing volunteers. Oh, yes, let me put that link out there that I said I would. The American Prison Writing. Here we go. Also, if anybody wants to be part of the Idaho Prison Arts Collective, right now it's hard because we're in COVID and we have to be safe. But for the future, we want to have a lot of volunteers, anybody who wants to teach, perhaps yoga, writing, dance, music, painting. If there's anybody associated with the Mountain Home Arts Council, I mean, I know there are people as far away. I have a good friend, Shane Brown, who lives in Twin Falls. He would drive every 2 weeks on his own dime from Twin Falls, with a full-time teaching job, to teach writing in the prison over in CUNA. And he promised the guys there, I will keep doing this basically until the end of time. Or we didn't know the pandemic was going to hit. And so it did vastly disrupt everything. But it's very good for the residents to know they can count on these volunteers, that it's not a flash in the pan thing, like we're here today, gone tomorrow. Can we receive a link to the voice poem? Oh, I don't have that available. Here's what I will do. It's so short. I will type it up and send it to Chris. And if that's okay, Chris, and you can send it out to anybody who wants it. Can that work? It's beautiful, that voice. It's haunting. I think I can do that. Yes, okay, can do. Can do and will do. Anything else? Any other questions, comments? I am a voice. Yeah, it's just 2 paragraphs. Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to be here with you. And thank you for your interest and your concern and your empathy, your kindness, your talents. I've had a wonderful evening and I'm so grateful.
Us too. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Is there
Thank
anything
you.
else I need to put out in the chat that I said I would? Okay, Prison Writing Archive is the primary one. And I also recommend his book, as I think I mentioned. I'll put that out in the chat really fast.
Well, and also remember, for those that want to do the writers workshop tomorrow, 10 a.m.
10 a.m. We'll have some fun writing poetry together virtually. Yes, that will be fun. It won't be quite as it will be intense, but it won't be quite as heavy a weight on our shoulders. So I hope to see you there tomorrow. Tell your friends, family, loved ones, neighbors, and we'll be able to get together again in the morning.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so very much. I
Thank
just
you.
enjoyed being with you. Okay, everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.